Good morning. We will start this webinar in 1 minute, but I'm going to ask for a show of hands for those of you who know how to do the show of hands. Please let me know if you can hear me by raising your hands. Okay, that's a good sign. I'm seeing a lot of hands being raised. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to wait 1 minute and then we will start this webinar. Good morning. My name is Brad Harrington, and I am leading this webinar this morning, Friday, August 20th, 2021, for the New Jersey Neighborhood Revitalization Tax Credit Application Workshop. The application cycle for projects has started, and so this webinar is an annual feature of getting it going to allow all of you who are participating and who are interested in applying to understand the rules of the road and to get going. So without further ado, here I am again. I am your presenter for today. The agenda. There's actually only one handout. I apologize. Only one handout while the webinar is active. There's a control panel that you should have access to on the right-hand side. And through that, you can obtain the one handout that I have put there, which is the overview and guidelines document. Following this slide will be more slides. There's actually a total of 45 in this slide deck. So you've seen the first 3, including this one. So after this, there is 42 more to go. And my hope is to cover all of this within the next hour plus. Normally, I encourage questions and then say I will answer them. Today, I am going to encourage questions, and they can be submitted again through the control panel. There is a place where you can type them in. However, I may not be able to answer them during this webinar, again, because I'm trying to keep this to an hour and an hour plus. If I cannot answer questions, then they will be answered subsequently, either through an individual contact or through a communication by email, a group email, following this webinar to those or to are registered to be here. Here we go. And just give me a second here. Just want to make sure about something. Okay, pardon the interruption. Okay, some highlights for this RFP, the NRTC project RFP for 2021-2022, or New Jersey State Fiscal Year 22. The tax credit percentage is 100%, same as last year. Available tax credits is $15 million, and the available funds for awards is $14.2 million. Both of these are set both by statute and by state budget. You may recall, for those of you who participated last year, that the available tax credits was lower last year. And also the available funds was lower. This year, 15 million is 100% of the tax credits which are authorized by statute, and 14.2 million in available funds is 95% of possible funding if all tax credits are used and allocated. So perhaps the program will set a record and allocate all $15 million in tax credits. Now, eligibility to participate. There are 2 slides. So on this first slide, and this has changed since last year, because right now we are in the midst of accepting and doing reviews of neighborhood plans which have been submitted by a number of organizations. So let me explain further. Eligibility is established, firstly, if an organization has an NRTC plan document that is approved as of or after September of 2020. This includes organizations that are new to NRTC, whether it's in a municipality that has not previously participated with the program, or in a neighborhood which has not participated with the program previously. That plan had to have been submitted to the NRTC program by this past June 30th. And we, the New Jersey Department of Community Affairs, need to give formal approval to that plan by September 10th, 2021. And yes, if you're looking at the calendar, that's 3 weeks from today. There's activity in motion. NJDCA approval is evidenced by a letter from the Commissioner of the Department of Community Affairs. So that's one way for eligibility to participate being established. Second way is for those of you on this webinar who have an old or lapsed NRTC plan, and we've certainly talked about this in the last several NRTC webinars and in-person sessions. But this is what we're doing this year. Eligibility is established if, in this situation, your organization submitted a new plan by June 30, 2021, and it's under active review by NRTC. And I can say publicly there are 7 organizations that qualify under this sub-criteria. Alternatively, if you have not submitted such a plan, you are eligible to participate if you provide us, as part of the application that we're going to be describing, a detailed summary about what is happening to create a new NRTC plan, activity that has occurred and activity that remains to occur. So please take note of this. I'm going to move on to the next slide, but this page will be available later on. And also, this is consistent with guidance that was distributed by me back in May with regard to eligibility. Once again, I noticed a question has come up. I'm asking that questions be typed in. I'll take a quick look and see if this is a question that's of a technical nature. And okay, there is one member who says she can't hear anything, and I apologize for that. However, I did do a sound check that said that people could hear me. So once again, I'm going to ask people to raise hands and tell me if they can hear me. Okay, I'm getting a lot of raised hands, and I do appreciate that. So one thing I will say is that this webinar is being recorded and that it will be posted to the NRTC website hopefully next week. So for that person who can't hear me, I apologize, but if you cannot hear me, it will be recorded and posted. Let me continue. The NRTC project application is entirely electronic, as it has been for many years. What's on the screen is a screenshot of the log-on page for New Jersey Department of Community Affairs SAGE, or System for Administering Grants Electronically. And the web address is listed at the bottom of the page right here where my laser dot is. A SAGE login is required to use it. And I say that for the benefit of those of you who are new to NRTC. Also, SAGE agency information must be up to date, and that applies to everyone listening here. That has been an impediment to being able to do things in SAGE. So make sure that if you have in your upper left-hand box on your SAGE Start menu page a link to update your agency information, please do it. Thirdly, if your annual organization audit is due, it needs to be done, and it needs to be submitted also via SAGE, because that can absolutely prevent you from submitting your application on the due date when that time comes. And I will talk a little bit later about things that you need to make sure you do before you submit your application, but this is definitely one of them. I will note that we have been allowed to extend audit due dates by, I believe it's 90 days from the usual due date. So if you have any questions about that, you can email me subsequent to this webinar and I can confirm it for you. But if you're in a position to do your audit report on time, then please do so. The majority of organizations that have participated with NRTC are on a calendar year for tax purposes. And normally that means the audit report is due 9 months after that, or September 30th. And again, what that means is for the calendar year 2020, that audit report is due by September 30th, unless we can extend that out to the end of 2021 because of COVID. So let me move on to the next slide. Copy forward is permitted again. That will allow you to take information from last year's application if you have it, and in essence reuse it. But be judicious, please, if you copy forward. If there is some part of last year's application that is non-germane, please edit it out as part of applying. That would be appreciated. Once you initiate the application, we ask that you do the first 2 bullet points. Read the application instructions, read the NRTC program overview and guidelines. They are both helpful reference documents, and they are fully uploaded and up to date for this year already. The help function, which is circled here in red and my laser dot is next to it, is also very useful. So please consult that if necessary. Okay, I'm now moving on to the application itself and the various parts of it that need to be completed. Application information. This is going to be on the left side of the application menu page once you've initiated an application. And this will consist of an application program description, project objectives, and scope of services, except scope of services is not applicable, so I'm gonna skip that. Application program description needs to be a sentence that completes the sentence, and the verbiage for that sentence is in SAGE, so I'm not going to repeat it. But sometimes I get a whole paragraph. I don't need a paragraph, I just need a sentence, and actually a partial sentence at that. Project objectives. A short description, and I do mean short, that can really be less than 10 words. Detailed description, that can be longer, but there is a character limit. characters limit, so please follow that. Methods. It's a required field, but it's really the least important of these 4 bullet points. So say the least about it here. And then performance measures, much more important. This will tell us what you're expecting us to expect to be done if we fund the application. So this is a place for quantifiables to be put in, and we do encourage that because that is a measurable. It can be very close to the detailed description. It doesn't need to be an absolute mirror of it, but it can be very close to it in terms of the words used. Then there's the components section on the left side of the application menu page. Program components, these should match the listed project objectives on the prior slide. So if you list, for example, 6 project objectives, then there should be 6 program components. And SAGE will then expect that a budget be completed for each component. We'll talk about that budget later on. Administration and personnel is allowed as a component. Now, you don't need to list admin and personnel as an objective. You are only allowed 1 administration personnel component per application. And there'll be some more discussion about this in a few minutes. Service areas, make sure that this is completed. There is instruction on the page as how to do it, and do it by municipality, not by county. Because there is a way that SAGE allows you to only designate a service area as a county. But the proper way to do it is by municipality. You'll have to click on a drop-down menu that lists all the counties in New Jersey. And then after that, all of the municipalities in the selected county will display in a drop-down menu, and you select the appropriate municipality. Okay, I am now moving over to the right-hand side of the application menu page, project description. This is going to be where the storytelling begins, because I do conceptualize the NRTC application as storytelling, letting us know what you want to do and giving us a good description. So it's a narrative form with a 15,000 characters limit. And please abide by that limit. It does save us time. I know that some of you would like to tell us a lot more than 15,000 characters allows, but we ask you to please abide by this 15,000 characters limit. This project description needs to include each proposed activity in these 15,000 characters, and that includes microenterprises, which I'll talk about on the next slide. The project description narrative also needs to say how these proposed activities will further the outcomes of the NRTC plan. And let me make the comment, going back a few slides, since we're in this period of having people, organizations with approved plans, plans being approved, plans not yet submitted. The outcomes need to be from the NRTC plan that is in effect. So if that means using outcomes from a lapsed NRTC plan, which we are allowing yet 1 more year, and hopefully for the last year, that's the set of outcomes we need. So for the group of 7 that have submitted a plan that's under review, unfortunately, I'm going to ask you to go back to that old lapsed plan and make sure you tell us how the activities that you're proposing relate and further the outcomes of that old lapsed plan. And I promise that this year will then be the last time we ask you to do that. Now, microenterprise. This has been a feature the last few years. The definition is a commercial enterprise with 5 or fewer employees including the owners. We will offer bonus review points if you have a micro enterprise. And it can be developing one or expanding one. And it can involve job training and workforce development targeted to neighborhood residents. And it can also involve strategic economic sectors. This is a repetition of what's in the overview and guidelines, so I'm not going to spend much more time on it. I will cover it again later. I'm going on to the next slide. Okay, the next section under application forms is organizational information. So this regards your agency, its board of directors, personnel, and then financial information. It's a somewhat long form, and it includes text boxes and uploads in addition to some straight out yes/no answers and tables. It will help inform us how you're doing and how able you are to proceed with the application if we for us to consider approving it for eligibility. Next form is called Community Development Experience. It's a narrative form, 9,000 characters long, maximum. And here is where you would tell us your track record of completing NRTC funded activities within the past 5 years. If you're new to NRTC, this is not something you're going to be able to easily do, but there's something coming up that you will be able to do. But for the many of you who are past NRTC grantees, give us a brief description of those activities within the past 5 years. So we're talking about between 2016 and 2020. And give us an idea of what performance measures were and what actually occurred in terms of accomplishing your NRTC funded activities. Now, for all applicants, including those that are new to NRTC, giving us information about similar completed activities that weren't NRTC funded will be helpful too, in that same 5-year time frame and in the same neighborhood. Because remember, this is all in one specific neighborhood in which you are working that is either NRTC eligible or for which NRTC eligibility is being established. Next application form is development information. Again, this is a long form. It has tables, yes, no's, text boxes, and uploads. And it's also a form that can be completed multiple times if you have more than one development activity to do. And I'm going to refer you to the application instructions for guidance on completing this, especially Part C of this form, which is a text box in which we ask for detailed information. And in the application instructions, this detailed information, instead of being in black ink, will be in purple ink, similar to the purple for the heading on this page. So please look for that. Next application form is non-development information. This is similar to the development information form I just described. It has text boxes and tables as well as yes, no, and some narrative. Don't believe it has, no, it does not have any upload fields. And it is a field that can be completed multiple times. A good number of you have many non-development information forms. So perhaps you can arrange them to be done alphabetically in terms of the name of the activity, because with Sage, we review them sort of in the order that they are uploaded. And there's not necessarily a rhyme or a reason that Sage is going to do it, other than the order in which you, the applicant, is submitting it. So if you are able to do it alphabetically by activity, that would be appreciated. One more point to cover here. If a non-development activity is a continuation of an activity from a prior NRTC grant or prior NRTC grants, plural, we will need to know from you what was accomplished and what the impact was from the two most recent NRTC grants where that activity occurred. And also, we would like you to give us a rationale for continuing it. So if you don't have this situation, then you don't have to fill it out. But if it is applicable, then please fill it out. Next form is a timeline, and this should be for each program component and its activities. And it's a 2-year timeline by quarter. So fill out this particular form for each quarter during a 2-year period where you expect the activity to be active. So if an activity is going to start up a year from now or a year after funding, indicate that and indicate the number of quarters that it will continue on. So similarly, if an activity is going to start up right away but be done in 6 months, then indicate the 2 quarters that it will be active. Next is neighborhood assets. This has been part of the project application the last few years. It's also part of the neighborhood plan application. So yes, there is going to be some repetition. Some things are not going to change. Neighborhood assets consist of community assets, regional assets, and municipal revitalization priority. Community assets are listed here. These 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 categories. And there is a list provided of the eligible possible community assets. And these will be checked. So unfortunately, that means that we may rule out some that you think are community assets, which are not. So please follow the list that we provided and make sure that they are in the neighborhood, with the one exception that medical facilities can be within half a mile of the NRTC neighborhood. Regional assets. Similarly, there is a list provided in the SAGE application. Those are the only possible eligible regional assets. So just use them. And if you can't, then don't. Municipal revitalization priority. This will be an upload, and the instruction is that you provide us with an indication that the municipality considers this NRTC neighborhood an area of focus. And one way to do that is if the municipality has declared this neighborhood an area in need of redevelopment, also an area in need of rehabilitation declaration is evidence of municipal revitalization priority. Also, if the municipality is doing infrastructure work or intends to do so in the next year or so, and will put it in writing to you, that also can work. So that is the kind of documentation we are looking for in terms of municipal revitalization priority. Okay, the next form is neighborhood involvement. And this consists of, well, we do ask that you list the number of years the applicant, you have been active in your neighborhood. But then we ask for you to list the development projects you've completed over the past 5 years. So again, this is between 2016 and 2020. And we do want the location specified, address as best as possible, or street intersections otherwise. Physical or completed development projects do not need to be restricted to housing and or economic development. And recreation facilities come to mind if you did that. And also, NRTC funds do not need to have been used in completing these development projects. The limit is 6,000 characters. Another part of neighborhood involvement is community development meetings and community improvement events in the past 12 months that had active resident participation. And I will comment here that I am well aware that the past 12 months, we have all been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. So meetings can include those that were done virtually. I believe that community improvement events did occur. Globally speaking, I can't speak for each of you individually if they were done in compliance with COVID protocols. I list here examples of meetings, examples of events. For both of these, provide the dates that they occurred. And again, there's a 6,000 characters limit. The next two application forms are addressing distress and attracting investment over the past 5 years. Addressing distress is a narrative form in which we ask you to talk about how the proposed activities are intended to address poverty, unemployment, and incomes. What are the anticipated measurable impacts of those activities? And the character limit here is 6,000. Attracting investment over the past 5 years is backward looking, 2016 to 2020. And it's a table. And we want you to list NRTC funding between 2016 and 2020 for both NRTC funded activities and for similar non-NRTC activities that involve capital and program costs only. And the limit is 6,000 characters. I may be slightly wrong on the table comment that I made here, but either way, if this is a narrative form, then there's a 6,000 character limit, and we ask you to do this listing. Now, other sources of funding is completely different than what I just described under attracting investment past 5 years. This is forward-looking to the activities that you are going to include in your application that you would like us to consider for funding. And what we want here is for you to list committed and anticipated sources of funds, not including the NRTC program funds that you're applying for. Also, if you list Wells Fargo Regional Foundation funds, they should not include implementation grant funds that are being used for administration purposes. It really should only be Wells Fargo funds that are going to help do programmatic activities. Next is attachments, and we ask for a map, digital photos, funding commitment letters, and then returning for this year a report about a lapsed NRTC plan if applicable. So let me highlight these a little bit more. The neighborhood map needs to show where each project activity is going to occur. We don't tell you which mapping program to use, but we do say to please clearly mark where the proposed project activities are going to be. Digital photos. Please do this as a consolidated upload, as opposed to uploading one photo at a time and using up all the slots on the page. funding commitment letters, and this relates to the other sources of funding that I talked about a minute ago. So this pertains to each source that you list. And please, again, do this as a consolidated upload of all the funding commitment letters. Next slide will be the report from applicant with a lapsed NRTC plan. We do offer additional upload slides, but I'm discouraging your easy use of them, please. Try to keep what you upload to the pages where they're asked to be uploaded. And if you absolutely can avoid an additional slot, then go ahead and use it, but don't use it right away. I have seen more than a couple applications where all the slots are used up and there's still information that's missing. And then we have to work some things out. So I'd prefer to avoid that. Here is a slide about the report from an applicant with a lapsed NRTC plan. So recall we talked about this earlier in terms of eligibility for this project application cycle. For the 7 organizations that have an NRTC plan that is submitted and under active review, the upload should consist of the date that the plan was submitted, its executive summary, and a synopsis of its strategies. For all other lapsed NRTC plans, provide a detailed summary of the activity that has occurred and remains to occur to create a new NRTC plan. So I am repeating myself from earlier in this webinar. This will involve a good number of organizations which are currently doing new neighbor plans. And it does not involve the brand new organizations which submitted a plan for consideration. So in your case, if you're new to NRTC by municipality or neighborhood, this particular thing is not applicable. But for those of you that it is, these are the 2 criteria to be followed. Okay, we are moving steadily down the page in terms of application forms on the right-hand side. Personnel, these are actually standard forms. We want them to be used for agency staff who would be NRTC funded if the application is successful in terms of implementing an activity. This is also for listing agency staff that would have NRTC involvement, such as an executive director or a chief financial officer, even if the time is not reimbursed with NRTC funds. And that does happen sometimes. This is a form that can be completed multiple times. And part of the information we are going to ask for on this form is the weekly time commitment by number of hours, the years of experience that the person listed has with the organization, plus an upload of that person's resume. Next, we have partner information if applicable, and a majority of applications do feature partners. So we ask that a form be completed for each partner organization. This is a form that can be completed multiple times. It is a narrative text, largely a narrative and text form, and there is an upload box for resumes. So please do upload those resumes. I have been asked in the past, and I guess this pertains to the prior slide too, if you are contemplating hiring someone, what do I need to do here? Well, what you can do, and maybe it's more applicable to consultants and personnel more than a partner, but I'll make a comment anyway, is fill in the page and where the name of the person is, then you can put in to be determined or TBD. And then instead of uploading a resume, you can upload a a job or position description, and then that will give us good information. Okay, finally on this slide, consultants, if applicable. This would be a person who would implement an activity. So in my mind, this does not include an architect being retained to help develop new housing, but it would be someone who is helping to run a recreation program or a job training program, something like that. This form can be completed multiple times, and we definitely want the resume uploaded, or as I indicated, if a consultant is to be hired, a description of the work that this consultant would be doing, and perhaps even the process that you're going to go through to select this particular consultant. Okay, the next form, and we're getting close to the end of the application forms, is implementation team information for partners and consultants. So this is information that we want that's not on the partners form and the consultants form, but it is information that is on the personnel form. So it's all going to be on one form, which is in table format, which is weekly time commitments and experience in years implementing proposed activities, the proposed activities in the application. So this form will relate to any partner form you complete and any consultant form that you complete. Okay, certification sheets. Number one, the resolution. And we always have issues here, so let me try to be as clear as I can about this. A resolution to apply for and accept the NRTC funding must be submitted with this application. And we provide a template document for this resolution. So please use that template document and not a document of your own choosing or making. That document needs to list a dollar amount. That dollar amount can be the amount that you're applying for. And there is language that says that the department can award more or less. So at least put a dollar amount in, the dollar amount of the application. It does need to be properly signed and sealed. So executive directors of nonprofit organizations applying for NRTC funds should be eligible and as authorized officials in SAGE to do things. And so they should be authorized in the resolution to sign any necessary documents. And that signature can be an electronic, and we're talking about electronic signature as well as actual physical signature. Board presidents, if you want to, they can be, but they're not going to be the ones to execute a grant agreement, so they don't have to be. Resolutions must be properly sealed. This needs to be by the current secretary to the board of directors for your organization. And this is someone who should be listed in your SAGE agency information as of the date that you submit the application, as the agency's, as the board of directors board secretary. This is something that we have to do a lot of correcting on. And so if you can make note of this and get it right for us, this will save some effort on our part. An alternative to a board secretary sealing or attesting to the resolution being properly adopted is either a notary public or an attorney at law in the state of New Jersey. Okay, I'm going to move down to the second certification sheet item, IRS determination letter. This is for new applicants only, and there are a few on this webinar, so please make note of that. Please upload your IRS determination letter. Number 3, this applies to everyone. Please supply your organizational chart. Number 4, the application cover page. This is something that you can print out from Sage, then sign it. It's a 2-pager, and then upload it. And then number 5, insurance certificate for fidelity bonding. This is a requirement that you carry at least, I would say, $100,000, if not even more, in insurance that would protect the Department of Community Affairs and its funding in case there is any malfeasance or criminal activity by the part of a grantee that might jeopardize the funding. There is a specific place for this to be uploaded. It's at the bottom of the page, and the heading is, please upload any third-party agreement. This is where this insurance certificate should be placed. Now, the budget overview, very important, because this is where you're going to put your dollar figures in. Each objective, remember, we talked about that earlier in the webinar, each of the objectives that you list should match up with a program component. And then Sage is going to require that a budget be completed for that program component. There are instructions to create the budgets, and they're in the application instructions, top right part of the application menu page. The help function can also be of assistance with creating the budget. And then if you are requesting NRTC funds for administration and personnel, one budget component should be, one budget needs to be done, which means a component needs to have been originated for administration and personnel. So please do not spread out administration and personnel throughout your budget. Put administration and personnel into one component budget, please. And now we'll talk about administration and personnel in a little bit more detail. And this is slightly different from last year and prior years. Up to 20% of grant funds may be used for program expenses that either directly relate to delivering NRTC activities and or for general administrative expenses so long as they are related to NRTC. For those of you who have done applications before, you may remember that we asked for a distinction between direct and indirect admin and personnel costs. We've eliminated that for this year, and we're just making it entirely up to 20% of what you asked for may be used for direct and or indirect expenses. The maximum that you can apply for is $985,000. 20% of that is $197,000. So you can start to plan accordingly. We do ask, in terms of coding it in Sage when you build the budget, to use the heading or the category of program-personnel for directly related to expenses, directly related to delivering NRTC activities, and the coding of ADM-personnel for general expenses, such as if an executive director is going to have some general oversight and have some general reimbursement, but is not directly implementing and delivering an activity. Last point on this page, if you are wanting to use dollars for partners and consultants, and it would help to, and it would go towards paying, in essence, salaries and for them, they do not count under the 20% limit here. And I also do want to make a comment in terms of this 20% limit. We characterize that as a pretty generous upper limit, but there were a couple of applications that we received last year, and I will not name names, or even locations, but I will say that these two applications utilized much more than 20% of their grant funding for program expenses, directly related to or general administration related. We're going to be very vigilant about this year. So you can help us by being very vigilant now and making sure that you do not exceed this 20% limit. And this would be greatly appreciated. All right, so that is the project application. Before you submit it, look on the left-hand side of the application menu page, find the errors icon, and click on the word errors next to it. You'll then get a new page that loads that has any errors that might still exist. And those errors usually consist of omissions. And yes, an audit report being overdue is an omission. So it will show up here for errors. So this is a useful tool for you to make sure that you're getting the application complete. And once you have no errors, when you click on that, it will say, Sage will tell you no errors have been detected. So that's what you want to see. Please regard the application as final product. Once you submit it, it can't be changed materially. We can only and intend to only come back to you if you're missing certain things. And of course, I've talked a few times about and asked nicely to make sure that you don't forget to include things in this application. So if there is a problem with the resolution, then we'll come back to you. But if there is something about the activities and that just doesn't make sense, then it's not going to make sense to us. And we, unfortunately, are not in a position to have a long dialogue to correct it. So make sure that what you submit to us reads well and makes sense and has all the necessary documentation, if it's required, to back it up so that we understand it fully. And that goes for whether it's a development activity or a non-development activity. Don't make us guess, because if you do, that could affect our review of it. Speaking of review, threshold criteria. The application needs to comply with NRTC's 60-40 rule. And many of you know what this means, but I'm going to repeat it for the benefit of those who are new to NRTC. A minimum of 60% of the funds being requested must be used for housing and or economic development activity. So a quick rule of thumb, before you submit the application, because Sage is not going to check for this. This is a program manager check once we get it. And if we find this, it's going to be too late. So before you submit it, subtract your admin and personnel figure from the total, from your top line ask, the amount that you're requesting. And then of the result of that subtraction, multiply it by 60%. And then compare all of your housing and economic development activities, the sum of that, to that figure that you just computed. And if you're above 60, then you're in good shape. If you're not, then you're going to have to make some adjustments. Sadly, it seems like at least one application a year is disqualified for not complying with the 60-40 rule. So try not to be that one. Because if we do find it, we just mark it and move on. Secondly, you must have an eligible neighborhood plan, and we had the earlier slides about eligibility, so I will not repeat that. But it's also in the overview and guidelines, which is a handout which you can download while this webinar is going on. Now we get on to evaluative review, and this is where we take what you have submitted to us and put it under the microscope, use a fine-tooth comb, sift it, whatever analogy you would like to hear us describe it as. So the first set of evaluative review is nonprofit capacity, and it's 36 overall points, so that's more than a third of the total points, and I've just given away the point system, but I'll have a slide in a couple minutes about the total points. And that's broken down further by project track record. We talked about that under community development experience. Financial health, that relates to what you put in under organizational information. Funds attracted from other sources. That can be, I'm pretty sure that is, yes, that is fund that looking back over the past 5 years. And then staffing level and staff stability, that is a combination of several forms. So combined, that comes to 36 points. Next is a combo of neighborhood plan and feasibility of activities. So earlier in the webinar, we talked about making sure that you told us that your proposed activities relate to the outcomes of an approved neighborhood plan, and that neighborhood plan can be brand new if we've approved it by September 10th. Otherwise, it has to be the plan, if it's a lapsed plan, that we've allowed you to use one last time. So that coordination is worth up to 10 points. And then feasibility of activities, and this is both development and non-development, can they be completed and operated and sustained? And that's up to 20 points. So be complete when you fill out those development activity forms and non-development activity forms. That will help us do the feasibility, as well as make sure you relate your activities to outcomes, whichever outcomes need to be used, so that we can do that review as well as possible. Third, on neighborhood assets and involvement, this is 17 overall points. And we talked about community assets before. We talked about regional assets. We talked about municipal revitalization priority. We talked about community development projects. We talked about community meetings and events. We did not talk about housing value trend and distress level. These are, and actually I want to point out, none of these are new categories. We've used them in past years. Now, of course, they're new to you if you're new to NRTC. We at DCA will compute the housing value trend based on publicly available Census Bureau data, similarly with distress level. And I believe there is some additional discussion about distress level in the overview and guidelines. So that will now make you go to that document and read it. So please do that. Next is leveraging investment for proposed project activities, a longer phrase for the other sources of funds form that was listed before. And quite frankly, the more additional investment you have for proposed activities, the more points are going to come here, quite frankly. Number 5 is readiness to proceed. This review will be done really at the same time that the review for, I'm going back one slide, or 2 slides, the feasibility analysis is being done because it relates to the development activities and non-development activities that you have listed. So be as clear to us about whether an activity is ready to proceed or in what fashion, how soon. And number 6, addressing distress, that relates to the addressing distress form covered earlier. Now we get to the 2 bonus point categories. Microenterprise, this has been a bonus point category in the past. This is slightly revamped so that it's up to 4 bonus points. If you propose a microenterprise and it makes sense to us and we accept it, that's 2 points. An additional point is possible if that microenterprise involves job training and workforce development programs targeted to neighborhood residents. One additional point to that can be given if the microenterprise involves the key strategic sectors listed here, and you will also find these key strategic sectors listed in the overview and guidelines, so I will not repeat them here. Finally, in terms of evaluative review, neighborhood plan. We are offering up to 2 bonus points. And it's as follows. For those who are going to apply that have an already approved neighborhood plan, that is worth 2 bonus points. For plans that are new to NRTC and we approve them by September, as we indicated earlier, that's 2 points. Then finally, for that group that has submitted an update to a lapsed plan and we are actively reviewing it, we are providing 1 bonus point. So that's what we are offering regarding neighborhood plans. And here is the total table for evaluative review. The total is 106 points. It's really 100 points plus 6 possible bonus points. So I'll linger on this for a few seconds. I am now moving on to what happens after we've done our review. Those applications that we accept as qualified will go into the qualified projects pool, and the number of points out of that 100 or 106 points that is needed is 60.0. And they'll be publicized to funding contributors, and those funding contributors are companies that do business in the state and have a state business tax liability, and NRTC credits can be applied for by those companies and be used against that tax liability, and then they will provide a dollar-for-dollar funding to us. And here I am already telling you what about all this. The companies will use the qualified projects pool to determine their funding choices, submit credit applications, they'll designate funding, and then we are wanting sufficient designated funding to be made in order to recommend an application automatically for approval. And that amount is 40%. And this is a lower figure than last year. So this will give more possibilities for funding for more applications. It used to be 50%. So we're trying to be more expansive with NRTC than in years past, both in terms of total credits available, total funding available, and the floor amount of funding that needs to be designated. Okay, moving on. Here is the timeline. The application became available on Wednesday, which was the date that we had emailed you to indicate it would become available. It's due to us in several weeks. September 27th, 2021, that is a Monday. The last day to initiate an application is the Friday before, September 24th. But I respectfully ask that you not wait until September 24th to set up your application, because as I indicated, there might be some things that you need to resolve and you don't want to be at a last minute worrying about them. Get started with the application much sooner, work on it steadily, and even try to submit it before September 27th. That is appreciated. Even though we're not giving bonus points for early submissions, it would be appreciated. Okay, the qualified projects pool, which we just talked about, is tentatively to be publicized on the Monday before Thanksgiving. But as you see, that date may be revised. And we do have a history of revising dates, and this is definitely one that has been revised. But the intent is to start it before Thanksgiving and have it open for several weeks until the middle of December so that contributing companies can make their choices, and then also submit their funds by the end of 2021. And then in the early part of 2022, we will make our recommendations for approval based on how the companies participate, and we can hope that we have a banner year in 2021. Okay, I believe that is the last slide. Here is the last slide. I have my information here, and I have the information of my staff here: Chris Hibbs, Dorothy Izuka, and our newest addition to NRTC, Susan Catlett-Oxendine, who started here a month ago, and we are very glad to have her. Also, here is the website address for NRTC. And I have not listed anyone's phone number except mine because we are still working somewhat largely remotely. I'm in my office today, and you can reach me today if you call, but I'm not in my office 5 days a week. I can't be certain when I'll be in the office 5 days a week. So the best way to contact me and us is by email. Okay, the time is now 11:39. I see there are some questions that are listed, but I'm going to take a quick peek to see what they say, if there is any that I can answer here. Okay, I am not going to be able to answer any of these questions here. What I will do is review them subsequent to this, and either individually answer them, or if it's the kind of question that needs to be broadcast to everybody, we will send out a broadcast to provide that information to everybody. So we do appreciate that you took time out this morning to be part of this webinar. As I indicated, it's being recorded, and it will be posted to the NRTC webpage, hopefully by this time next week. Just keep checking there, and it will be listed as an MP4, and good luck with your application. Thank you very much.